The fact that we didn't have a nuclear war was not how things had to go. It was the hard work of many, smart, hardworking, military officials and diplomats and scientists and many people around the world who worked very, very hard so that we didn't end in a nuclear war. But it didn't have to go that way. We got lucky. In the same way, AI can be the best thing to ever happen to us, but it doesn't happen for free. It doesn't happen by default.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Parton, and you're listening to the Feedback Loop by Singularity. Before we jump into today's episode, I'm excited to share a bit of news. First, I'll be heading to South by Southwest in Austin on March 14th for an exclusive Singularity event at the Contemporary, a stunning modern art gallery that is in the heart of downtown Austin. This will include a full day of connections, discussions, and inspiration, with coffee and snacks throughout the day, with an open bar celebration at night. So if you're heading to South by and you're interested in joining me and having some discussions, meeting our community of experts and change makers, then you can go to su.org/basecamp-South by Southwest, which I will link in the episode description. So you can sign up for this free invite-only event. And just to note, it is not a marketing ploy when I say that space is genuinely limited. So if you are serious about joining, you probably want to sign up as soon as you can and get one of those reserved spots. And in other news, we have a exciting opportunity for those of you with a track record of leadership who are focused on positive impact. Specifically, we're excited to announce that for 2023, we're giving away a full ride scholarship to each one of our 5 very renowned executive programs where you can get all kinds of hands-on training and experience with world-leading experts. You can find the link to that also in the episode description. And once more, time is of the essence here because the application deadline is on March 15th. And now on to this week's guest, AI researcher and founder of Conjecture, Leahy, who is dedicated to studying AI alignment. The AI alignment research focuses on gaining an understanding of how to build advanced AI systems that pursue the goals they were designed for, instead of engaging in undesired behavior. Sometimes this just means ensuring that AI share the values and ethics that we have as humans so that our machines don't cause serious harm to humanity. In this episode, Connor provides candid insights into the current state of the field, including the very concerning lack of funding and human resources that is going into studying this very important topic. Amongst many other things, we discuss how the research is conducted, the lessons that we can learn from animals, and the kind of policies and processes that humans need to put into place if we are to prevent what Connor currently sees as a highly plausible existential threat. So on that optimistic note, let's jump into it. Everyone, please welcome to the Feedback Loop, Connor Leahy. To start, maybe you could just provide us a little bit of the background story that led you to founding Conjecture and a bit of insight into your current efforts.
Yeah, so Conjecture grew to a large degree out of my previous project with the Luther AI. So Luther AI was an open source community building, large language models and doing research and ML and such. They're still around, still doing great stuff. I'm less involved nowadays than I was back then. And basically, while I was working with Luther AI, there's a lot of things I think you need to get done, like a lot of research that needed to get done, many important things to do. And well, I love the Luther AI with all of my heart, but working in the Luther AI is, I would describe kind of like trying to herd cats, while the cats are also the smartest people you've ever met and have crippling ADHD.
Oh no.
So it was, if something exciting was going on and people wanted to work on something, it was truly magic. We built really very complex software and trained some of the largest open source models, and some of the and people still use these models to these days, with 2 or 3 people at a time or something working on these things. Things that could take industry labs, large groups of people to get done. Um, but if you have to do boring things, and often a lot of work that needs to get done is quite boring, it can be very tricky. So I basically realized at some point is that if you want to get people to do the boring things, you have to pay them. So to a large degree, Conjecture is a me being practical. It's just like, hey, all right, so I think alignment and AI safety is the most important problem that I want to solve, that I think is very important. Research is expensive. You had to pay people to do things, and you need like offices and computers and stuff. So let's make a company. And yeah, to answer your question about what are their goals of Conjecture. So as I've already said, I'm pretty practical in the sense that what I want, I'm sure we talk about this a lot, is I think the alignment problem. So this is the problem of how do you make powerful advanced AI systems do what we want and not do what we don't want them to do. This is of course a big topic and there's many aspects to it. But yeah, I think this is a very big problem. I think we're very far from solutions, especially at scale to very powerful systems. And the Conjecture, the goal ultimately is to work on this problem. Say, how do we design powerful AI systems that can do useful and impressive things and reliably, consistently, actually follow our wishes, actually do what humans want, and how can we avoid these if these systems are doing things we don't want them to do? And so one of the questions on research I'm most interested in is, okay, how can we design systems that where at the very least we can like rule out that it will do X, or that like it will never, or like we can make a exhaustive list of things it can do, and that list will not be broken.
Yeah, fair enough. And for people who may not be familiar, because this seems like a very nebulous and almost abstract task that you're setting yourself to, how does one really go about doing this alignment kind of research? Like, are you guys sitting around reading like Kant and Nietzsche in your spare time and then trying to code up something? Are you just creating these use cases where you're just trying to see if you can break a system and get the AI to go somewhere where you don't want it to go? Like, what is alignment research, this big umbrella term, really look like, maybe in practical terms?
Yeah, so we don't only do alignment research. We're also a
Mhm.
company. We also build tools. We train our own models. So we also train like large language models and how
Mhm.
that's like classic engineering type work as you'd find it in any other startup. Um, and the alignment work in particular. So there's many different types of alignment work. And so importantly, it's is that the field of alignment is really very small. It's the number of people working full time on this problem rather than making AI stronger is like less than 200, probably less than 100.
That's so scary.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like we have thousands of the smartest people alive working on making AIs as strong as possible, as fast as possible. But I would say we probably have less than 100 full-time people trying to like actually control and understand these things. So it's a very strange like timeline we live in. It's like if like I understand how it got this way, but still it just feels like, man, really? Like, come on, we can do better than this. So so as with any early field of science that's relatively small, that has, there's founder effects and eccentricities, So like there's a lot of eccentric people in the alignment field. Not that surprising, right? Whenever a new field emerges, whenever there's a small, group of people trying something new, you have some eccentric people in there. So we have some people. So we have lots of different people trying very different things. Some people try very, very formal things. They try like, so like there's people, for example, like Vanessa Kosai, who is trying to like prove mathematically how to like make a perfect AI system that can, can never ever make any, mistakes and exactly understands the user and like everything formal and mathematical, which is insanely difficult. And I don't know if that's possible, but it's interesting that someone is trying. There's other people that work in that field as well. Other people just do very pragmatic research, as you describe, building, for example, people like Redwood Research, for example, use like language models and try to train them or like filter them so they, for example, do not produce harmful or like violent output or whatever, and see how they can break that. Like, how can these filters be overcome? And once you find a way to overcome them, how can you make your filter less of them? Whether you count this as alignment research is controversial a little bit. But another big area of research is interpretability. And this is one that we also do a lot of research on. So this is trying to understand how do neural networks actually work? Like, what does the internal structure mean? How do they represent concepts? How do they make decisions? How do you, etc. So this is something I'm very interested in, and we're very interested in conjecture. Not the only thing we're interested in, but it's one of the main areas of research that we're interested in. Is we look at neural networks, which you can imagine as these massive tables of numbers that all get like multiplied and added to each other, and then you get some output. And there is a lot of structure to these numbers, but it still is like a billion of numbers just kind of, there, so there's a lot of structure, but it's not easily understood structure. It's not like a computer program written by a human. It's way more like a computer program written by like an alien, or by like evolution. It's kind of, you look like DNA, if you look at like DNA in an organism, there's lots of structure there. Like, there's lots of things you can figure out, or like proteins and stuff. Like, there's lots of structure. There is sense in the madness, but it's still madness. It's still very, very complex system. It's not meant to be easily understood. So neural networks have the same like evolved kind of texture to it, where it feels more like doing biology than it does like doing traditional computer science. So a lot of what we do is on the research side is, we think about, okay, whatever experiments we could run to like try to understand what these things are doing internally. Sometimes we'll build like very small toy models and then try to like pick them apart piece by piece. Other times we'll take large pre-trained models and try to like see how they fail at various tasks and see if we can find structure and like how these errors come about, and like how we can develop, hopefully a better theory. So this is still very early research. Like, this is not, unfortunately, this is not the kind of thing that I expect to be solvable in like, 1 year, 2 years, or whatever. This is a massive undertaking. It's basically developing a new branch of science in a sense, or like, so the way I see things going in a good world, where we actually solve this problem, we actually make, great progress here and such, is basically we need to develop a science of intelligence. So like, there's like a little bit of this, there's a little bit of theory about neural networks, yes, and there's still like, we see learning theory, and like there's a little bit about like, Bayesian optimality and like Bayesian statistics and stuff like this. There is a little bit of theory, but most of this doesn't really apply to like the kind of stuff we actually care about. And I don't yet know what this paradigm of science will be. So we're kind of pre-paradigmatic. We're in this funny world where our engineering is far ahead of our theory. This is not untypical. Like, steam engines were developed before we developed thermodynamics, just by people tinkering and trying things out. They found ways of building very good steam engines at the time. And only much later did we develop the actual theory of thermodynamics to actually quantify and understand these systems. So I think we're in the post-steam engine, pre-thermodynamic stage of like understanding intelligence and understanding AI. I expect that if we have enough time, pre-Singularity, to do a lot more research on these kind of systems, I expect us to develop the thermodynamics of AI, whatever that looks like. I don't think it would look like thermodynamics. It would probably look very different. And then using that, I think we would be able to build bounded and corrigible and safe and powerful systems that, we build steam boilers that don't explode, and we don't have to, when steam boilers were first invented, they worked, but they were very dangerous. Like, they would explode all the time and kill like 20 people. Like, these were very dangerous machines. And luckily our AIs do not currently kill people.
Right.
Currently, knock on wood, that stays that way for a while. But it's not unreasonable to believe that as these systems become more powerful, they will become more dangerous by default, unless we have the appropriate safety measures. It's like steam boilers, suddenly we have temperatures and pressures and like, that didn't exist previously. Like, these weren't things people were used to dealing with. Like the pressure that exists inside of a steam boiler was not something that really existed in nature before then. It wasn't like it's the thing humans were used to dealing with, or that we evolved, steam-proof scales because in nature we were like resistant. We kind of this was a novel situation. We're encountering a novel form of environment, a novel form of danger that we eventually did overcome, and we now steam boilers are very, very safe. We now know how to build very, very safe steam boilers. But it took a lot of time and a lot of exploded boilers, and that might be very problematic if the boiler in question is something a bit more powerful than that.
To that end, are we coming across, or do you think we will come across new units of measurement, like new telltales that we can use to kind of figure out what's happening inside these systems?
I think so. I think a truly good theory of intelligence should be able to put, bacteria, plants, ants, dogs, humans, and GPT-3 on the same scale. Like these should all be, it should be possible to put all of these on a objective, not observer dependent, reasonable scale where everyone agrees, okay, this is a reasonable measurement scale of some kind. I have no idea what the scale would look like. I don't know what the units would be. I don't know how you would construct this, but I expect, if aliens from outer space at, 2000 years advanced came down and they handed us the textbook for their science of AI, it would include something like this. Like it would be like, oh, AIs are just a special case of an intelligence system. You also have like, humans and, E. coli and whatever, they're all optimizers. And there would be some kind of universal theory, but we're obviously far from that.
Well, to that end, are you looking to other animals, other organisms, I guess other forms of consciousness and intelligence to derive these models? Like, can a bat or a rat or a primate or any of these, forms that exist in the world, are they helping you inform this research at all?
So for the research, generally, no. So we do pure computer science, kind of engineering, experimental research. Of course, philosophically or inspirationally, I think it's important. So like, I think actually understanding, like, I think every AI researcher should read at least like one book about animal intelligence. If I can recommend one of them, I really like the book "Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are" by Franz de Waal. It's a very good book. All of Franz de Waal's books are very good. And I think one of my favorite genres of like my favorite genres of like philosophy professor, like strawman philosophy professor, are the kinds or like philosophy of mind and like claim all these things about intelligence or about humans or whatever that could be completely disproven if they meet exactly one animal and just interact with an animal and saw like how many of these traits that they think are unique to humans animals have as well. Like chimps obviously have theory of mind, like crows can obviously use tools. Like there's a lot of things. I basically think that a lot of intelligence is quite universal or quite simple in a sense. Like I expect that not all, but most of human intelligence already existed in like some of the first vertebrates. It was just very small. The same way that a tiny neural network from 20 years ago has most of the components of GPT-3. Not all of them. There's still several important things missing, but there's still a lot of core insights in like and a small feed forward neural network and backprop that already like does contain a lot. So I particularly like to think about chimps and especially chimps versus humans because it's pretty uncontroversial that chimps are very close to humans in many, many ways. Like you could see our brains are larger, more parameters, but most of the structure is the same. Like it's very, very simple. Sure, there's some tweaks, different hormones, and like, you have a bit more of those cells, that's whatever, but the structure is almost identical. Yet humans go to the moon and chimps don't. So there is some difference. And I don't think so. I think this difference is quite small. Like I think it exists. Like there's obviously a difference between humans and chimps. But I think this difference in like, space of algorithms, space of design space is like very small. And I think this is not super controversial to think. And I use this as a nice intuition pump when thinking about AI. So like, sure, maybe our current AI systems are like pretty silly and pretty stupid. And, they hallucinate stuff and they make mistakes and, they can't really take actions and stuff. But I think intelligence is not linear. Like it's not like you add 1 unit of effort and you get like 1 unit back. There are discontinuous returns, and that humans are probably not more than like 3 times more intelligent than chimps. Our brain's about 3 times as big, right? So we're maybe like 3 times as smart, which is pretty smart. But 3 chimps can't outthink the human. 3 chimps can't go to. If we had 3 times as many chimps as humans, they don't go to the moon. Something. So a very small algorithmic change and relatively small change in parameters can vastly change the resultant optimization pressure that can be employed in reality. So, the difference between like, GPT-2 and GPT-3 is like a factor of 10. So, and, maybe that's fine, and, it just gets like better by a certain degree. But, the difference between chimps and humans is about a factor of 3.
Yeah, has there been any work that you know of that has tried to maybe capture some of the evolutionary ideas around what unlocked that intelligence? Specifically, I'm thinking of conversations around things like dual inheritance theory, which is like our culture was a big driving force, and a lot of what makes our species so intelligent is the fact that we cooperate, that we talk to one another. Is there any work that you know of where we're having some of these like adversarial or maybe cooperative interactions taking place between AIs, and seeing if maybe giving them value systems or hierarchies or like social dynamics that we can compel them to behave in certain ways?
There is work on this, but and I might call out in particular some of the shard theory work done by like Alex Turner and such as work that I think is wrong and I think does not work, but I think it's interesting. So shout out to Alex and Quinton for doing that work. Even so, I don't think it will work at all. I think it's worth trying. It's interesting. Um, so there's several aspects of this. There's the aspects of like, okay, where does intelligence come from? How does it relate to like what are the features that made humans intelligent? And then there's the other question of human values. Like, where do human values come from? What does cooperative mean? And I think it's important actually to separate these. So one of the core things with alignment, which I think is very important, is that values and intelligence are separate. Like, you can build a very intelligent system that does not want what you want. It can want whatever it wants, the same way, you can like the color blue or the color green, like, it's not a difference to you. Like the same, but even more extremely so, especially the software system, right? Humans, we all agree on like, some things, like we kind of want to like not be in pain, we kind of want things to be like nice, most of us, except like some psychopaths, want other people to be happy and such. So like, we have like some things that we can agree on, but like with a software system, I mean, you can want anything, you just like type in the code, okay, this system wants to collect rocks, and then that's just what it's going to do. Like, why not? It's just a piece of code ultimately. So so this is called the orthogonality thesis. Is the kind of any system, I guess, just because a system becomes smart doesn't mean it will have converge in any set of values. Like, it's not, it will suddenly become a Nietzschean Ubermensch and like, or like, see that Kant was actually correct, or Christianity is the one true religion, or anything like that. No, why would it? It'll just do whatever it wants. Whatever you type in, or whatever we didn't type in, because currently we can't control these things like this at all. So why do humans become smart? I think a large amount of this is basically that humans moved a massive amount of their cognition outside of their brain. So you take an individual human with no language, no parents, no upbringing, no society, nothing. He's smart for a monkey, like still a very smart monkey. They'll figure out how to like throw rocks and stuff like that. But like, they won't figure out fire magically. If no one teaches them, they won't spontaneously know how to do that. They won't spontaneously learn many things per se. They won't know which many traditional cultures have incredible knowledge of like plants and animals, and they'll know what you can eat and what you can't. But that was all found out the hard way at some point. Someone ate the mushroom and got sick from it, and then they told the others that. So in a sense, I think the adaptation, if I had to pick one adaptation, so to speak, that makes humans human, is that we have memes. So this is in the Richard Dawkins sense. We have mimetic pieces of information, same we have a genetic piece of information. And I think most of human evolution nowadays happens through memes, not through genes. So if I met like my Paleolithic ancestor, we're not genetically that different. Sure, they'll probably be like hairier and a bit bigger than me, maybe, or whatever, but like mostly we not that different. But then mimetically, we would be vastly different. My like if I did logic tasks with him or like linguistic tasks or something, this would be something that my ancestor would do very, very poorly on compared to me. And I I know many facts and I know have many algorithms in my head that I didn't come up with. I can't come up with all computer science by myself. I'm not that smart. But other people can. I can learn it. So I know more about computer science than Alan Turing. It's not because I'm smarter than Alan Turing. I don't think I am. But it was other smart people pre-digested this and it was passed down to me. So humans moved from a genetic evolutionary mechanism to a mimetic kind of evolution. But we're kind of in between because we're still ultimately biological creatures. We still have genes. It's still important. And if you get bonked on the head really hard, then all those memes aren't going to help you. You're still screwed. So we're still biological creatures, but we're like the in-between stage. We're the in-between between biological and mimetic. And so an AI is a purely mimetic creature. So this is the next step in a sense, is that we're going from the biological to the intermediate to the purely mimetic. Like even the AI body or brain, quote unquote, is itself just code, just memes. It's just information. It's completely abstracted away from any kind of biological, happenstance. So this is also why I expect AI systems to evolve faster than humans, much, much, much faster. It will just be like, because like with humans, if you want to tweak anything about the hardware, you have to wait at least a generation, if not many generations. But it's much simpler with an AI system. You just run the new thing, just train on some different data. You can just change its architecture. Lots of things you can do here.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in the beginning of that about the disconnect between values and intelligence. And I forget what your example was, but basically an arbitrary goal and one kind of cliche question, but I think one worth asking is the paperclip scenario one that you think is realistic that an AI might, try to break apart all the atoms in the universe to make paperclips if we tell it that's what it wants to do? Like, do you think that that is a realistic apocalypse worth being afraid of?
So there is several versions of the paperclip maximizer story. I'm going to tell you the version that I like. So there's a version of the story that I think is better, which is so in the original story, it's like you have a paperclip factory, you tell it to like build paperclips and it like destroys everything. I want to put that one aside for a moment, instead tell a different version of the story. In this other version of the story, we have some kind of AI. We build some AGI system. Let's say we're the richest billionaire in the world. We hire all the best AI researchers in the world. We buy the biggest computer in the world. We stick them all in a room, and we're like, all right, build me an AI that makes me the most money possible. And they're like, all right, let's see what we can do. Throw a bunch of stuff together. Someone's high on Diet Coke and Red Bull. Late at night, figures out some clever algorithm trick or whatever. It's probably not going to be one discrete event, but like, we figure out some new algorithms. We have this big computer, train a bunch of stuff on it. We, leave it running over holidays or whatever, and then we come back to some system that, so we gave it some goal, and but we have to like actually cash that out. What do we mean to give something a goal? Currently, we actually don't know how to do this. So currently, for example, with systems like ChatGPT, the way we, for example, OpenAI doesn't want ChatGPT to insult their users. Reasonable thing they would want it not to do. Still, as everyone I think probably knows by now, there are prompts you can give ChatGPT that will make it insult the user or say politically incorrect things or whatever. So the way these systems were trained is using a method called RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback. So what you can do is you give the model, so this is not exactly correct, but it's close enough. Basically, you give the model a bunch of, you show it a bunch of text and various outputs for questions or whatever, and you have humans label them thumbs up and thumbs down. And then you train the model to be more likely to output thumbs up stuff and less likely to output thumbs down stuff. It's not exactly, but like close enough. So, this is, it's pretty useful. Like ChatGPT is pretty great. It's a pretty cool model. It's pretty useful. It's mostly very polite, almost to a fault. Pretty good. But I'm sure you could tell that like, well, this isn't really us exactly writing a goal so much as vaguely gesturing towards one, you know? So we might have a system that, we are training in this regard, and there's all kinds of correlations that exist in this data. Like, it's not like we're like writing down in code, here's what humans want. It's more like, here's, some stuff humans like, and they don't like this stuff, sort of. But the model can interpret this in any way. For example, an experiment we did with Conjecture with an earlier version of GPT models is we found if you asked one version of the model for a random number, it would give you a pretty random distribution of numbers. But if you asked it but if you asked an instruct fine-tuned version of the model for a random number, it would almost always give you one of two numbers. So, I don't think they intentionally tried to make the model, prefer these numbers. I think it was probably just, somewhere in the training data, these numbers happened to be some more of them, or they got a bit more thumbs up or whatever. So now the model thought to itself, well, these are my favorite numbers now. Those got thumbs up before, so these are now my favorite numbers. So if anyone asks me for numbers, I want these ones. So I'm telling you these examples because it's kind of important to get the feeling that it's not like someone sitting down at a console and being like, your goal is to maximize shareholder value or to be nice to users. It's way more vague and kind of like messy. So back to our story, we have our scientists boot up the system, and they give them like thumbs up when the bank account number goes up, or thumbs up when stock value goes up, or like whatever, right? So it gets like some associations with it, right? So maybe the system boots up, it starts, I don't know, buy some cryptocurrency or whatever, and they're like, oh, that's kind of weird, but let's let it cook, let's let the machine cook, let's see what we can do. And then, for some reason, 2 days later, the market crashes and it sells, and we're like, oh wow, it made us a ton of money, cool. It must have like learned from the internet, like it predicted that people are gonna sell soon, and so it like took a position that made a lot of money. So we're like, wow, awesome, this system's great, let's give it more compute, let's let it run for more. So now we have some system. To be clear, no such system currently exists that is like as sophisticated as the system I'm describing, but people are trying to build these systems. This is also very important to remember. So this system goes online, it scrolls through the internet, maybe it like messages people and asks them questions, it gathers information, it simulates stuff in its head, it does like all kind of stuff to like, do whatever it's going to do. And so at first, maybe this is great. It starts, it trades cryptocurrencies or stocks or whatever. But then eventually we notice like, oh shit, it's messaging people, threatening stuff on Twitter, telling them to send it Bitcoin. Otherwise, it's going to like, murder them or something. Well, that's no good. Why did it do that? We didn't want it to do that. Well, what happened was is that the system just simulated a bunch of timelines. So it's like, okay, well, if I contact this person and I say, hi, I'm a friendly chatbot, what happens? Well, person's not going to be super interested in that. What if I say, hey, I know where your family lives, here's their address, send me money? Oh, then I get more money if I do this. Awesome. So then it chooses this path. It's not because it's evil or because it's like conscious or anything, nothing of the sorts. It's just optimizing something in its head. So now this keeps going. Let's assume we don't catch it, or like, or we catch it, we shut it down, we apply a few patches, stops doing the thing, we send it some thumbs downs, and then we're like, all right, it's probably fine. So let's assume we do that. We send it some thumbs down, like, no, don't threaten people. That's bad. Don't do that. Well, then maybe it'll stop doing it. Let's say like we're optimistic and stuff like that. But like what it could do is, so whenever you give it a signal of, thumbs down, threatening people, it gives it a signal for two things. One, stop threatening people. And two, stop being caught threatening people. Either of those are fine. Because from the perspective, humans can only label what they see. So maybe the model now just hides how it threatens people, makes it super low key, or like does it through proxies or whatever. If humans don't label the deception, then it's just like, well, this seems to be legal. Why would it not be? So now we have some system that's, doing more and more secret things. Every time we catch it doing something bad, we can maybe stop it, maybe. But now it's getting better and better at lying to people. It's getting better and better at hiding things. It's getting better and better at all these kind of things. So over time, we've built some very powerful system that understands how the world works, that understands how humans work, that can manipulate humans, that can lie to humans, that can like hide information from humans. And now eventually maybe this system thinks, again, just thinking, just simulating possible actions it can take, and thinks, well, you know, if I was smarter, I could take even better actions. So maybe I should, just like do a bunch of computer science research and like figure out how to make a better AI system. So then it thinks a bunch, because it's super smart, has access to all the internet, it like figures out much better code. So it shuts itself down and runs the better code. Suddenly the system's 10 times as smart, or even just 20% smarter, doesn't matter. And then it starts trading on more data, or maybe it uses all its Bitcoin to buy more compute somewhere in China or something, so it can run more copies of itself or whatever. Eventually, we have potentially very suddenly we can have a system that is very distributed. It runs copies of itself on various systems. It's very smart. It was built to be smart. Again, it's not like a miracle that it suddenly became smart. No, like we designed it to do this. Like this is a thing that the smartest people in the world are currently trying to do. People are actively pouring billions of dollars trying to design systems of this. So at some point here, things go crazy, So the system gets smarter and smarter, At some point it notices, oh wow, I could just hack the stock exchange to set the value to infinity. Cool, I'll just do that. No one's gonna stop me. Then maybe it thinks, oh shit, wait, if I do that, the humans are gonna freak out. They're gonna be like really scared. And they're gonna like try to shut me down. Well, that's no good. If I'm shut down, they can't set the stockholder value to infinity. So I'm gonna have to protect myself. So what you get is a system that wants to retaliate, that wants to protect its own existence, not because it's conscious, not because it's afraid or has like a will to live or something, just because it calculates, hey, if I'm not here, then the value gets set back to a low number, and I don't want that. I want it to be set to a high number. So, now it starts hacking the Pentagon. Now, it gets access to weapon systems or who knows what. And now things go out of control. Maybe it's like, wow, it takes control of factories and it starts building robots. And it's like, oh, wait, I can build, I know I set the value to the highest, the max int, but if I build more memory, I can build bigger number int or whatever, right? So it starts building computer factories, and maybe the humans don't like that, so humans get just like blown off. They're like, all right, screw them. Maybe it takes all the oxygen out of the atmosphere so we can build more tools. Who knows? And then eventually, in this version of the paper for Maximizer, it keeps optimizing, and develops nanotechnology. It develops, spacefaring, intergalactic travel and whatever to get more and more resources and so on. And eventually, it comes to the conclusion that the most optimal way to build, computing is a small molecular squiggle that looks like a paperclip. And then it just builds more and more of those squiggles across the whole universe, so it can build more computers, so it can set the values high, and also so it can defend itself against anything who might try to tamper with it. So in this version of the story, it's still pretty weird. Like, this is still a strange story, but I think every step in itself is not impossible. Like this is a thing that the smartest people alive today, and some of the deepest pockets and the biggest companies are actively pushing towards building systems that have capabilities like this. And if we aren't able to control them, and if we set them, some vague goals, kind of like pointing in some vague direction, well, who knows what they'll do?
So how realistic is this to be a thing that happens then? I mean, when you have that much capital being thrown behind it, that much thought and energy being put into cultivating that kind of AI, it feels like a higher probability than not.
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, I'm very pessimistic about this. So, of course, there will be many people who disagree with me about this, but I think people have a very optimistic bias here. So, like, there's a very funny graph. I think it's from the Cold Takes blog, which shows the GDP over like 200 or like 300 years or 2,000 years or something, and like basically a flat line until go like straight up over the last like 200 years. And then at the very top there's a speech bubble which says, I don't know about all this sci-fi stuff. I have a very normal life and know what's normal, and I don't expect anything weird like this to happen. And it's like, this Singularity University podcast, so people are aware of this, whatever. But like, things change, and sometimes very dramatically and very quickly. And like, 3 years ago, we didn't have systems that can talk, but like we have AIs that can talk. Like, they're not perfect. They make mistakes, they make up stuff, whatever, but they can talk. Like GPT can talk. It can talk. Like I feel like I'm going crazy here. Like imagine you're in a sci-fi movie. You're watching a sci-fi movie. The scientists turn on the new system and it talks to them, and they're like, "Ah, man, it got the distance between New York and Chicago wrong. This thing is literally not interesting. Who cares?" But you'd be screaming at the screen. Like, what do you mean? It talks. Like, give me a break here, man. Like, if this was something that took 25 years to develop, right? And it's like really brittle and like it took all the world scientists working together to like figure this out, I'd be like, all right, probably we still have a way to go. But it wasn't. And these systems were developed by relatively small teams, using, a lot, but like not nation state level amounts of resources, training a GPT model costs, like maybe $10 million or something, which is a
It's not
lot of
that bad.
money,
Yeah, but it's
but
not
it's
that bad.
fine. Yeah, it's not that bad. It's not if it costs like 100 billion, then I'd be like, yeah, okay, we still have a long way to go here. But it didn't. And these systems keep getting cheaper and more effective very, very rapidly, Moore's law and whatnot. So unfortunately, yes, I think the way things are currently standing is that things are really stacked against us, in a sense that capabilities are advancing extremely quickly. There's lots of forces against us. Capitalism is one of the strongest forces on the planet. Just market value go up, and I understand, and this has brought us many good things in the past too. I'm not saying like this is like always a negative. Moore's law is great. We have so much great technology now that's like super useful. I love my computer. I love the internet. Like these are all really great things. But there is a it's kind of like a reactionary perspective in that like there's a lot of techno optimism, especially like in the Bay Area and such, where it's like they're so used to people screaming that tech is bad, but they've seen viscerally how good tech can be and like how much it can help people. Even so, people are now also getting a bit jaded about like social networks, such, which I'm also quite jaded about. And but it's easy to be very, very optimistic about these kinds of things when you have to remember that you know, all these nice things we have today still were built by someone. The security was enforced by someone. Like someone figured these things out. Someone. The fact that we didn't have a nuclear war was not how things had to go. It was the hard work of many, smart, hardworking, military officials and diplomats and scientists and many, many people around the world worked very, very hard so that we didn't end in a nuclear war. But it didn't have to go that way. We got lucky. In the same way, AI can be the best thing to ever happen to us. It can, do so much science. It can cure cancer. It can, help us, expand to the galaxy. It can solve almost any problem imaginable. And I do think this is a thing that physics allows us to do. There's nothing that's forbidden in physics from sitting down and building an aligned, powerful AI system that truly wants what's best for humans and allows us to expand the galaxy and solve all these wonderful problems. There's nothing that forbids this, but there's also nothing that guarantees it.
What are the paths that you see as the most optimal ones then? I mean, given that there are so many obstacles and negative incentives on the landscape, which path makes you the most hopeful? Or do you think like, guys, if I could just get everyone to look this direction for a second, we really need to go this way? Like, is there a path that you see forward?
One of the things I've learned now that I've been more active in the world, so to speak, running a company, raising money, talking to politicians, trying to work with governments and policy and such. One of the things I've learned is it's almost never the case where I'm like, wow, I just need this one thing and then everything else is irrelevant. It's almost always like, all right, give me anything and I'll work with it. Like, give me a lot of money, I'll work with that. Give me a lot of political power, I'll work with that. Give me a bunch of geniuses, I'll work with that. It's like there are actually many paths to victory. Like this is the positive spin. This positive spin, there's actually really a lot of ways we can win. There really are. The negative spin is just because they exist doesn't mean they're accessible per se. So, I can come up with hypothetical scenarios. I'm like, well, all of our politicians could just all look at AI and suddenly become hyper rational and be like, oh, well, this is a problem. We should all like, do no more military stuff. China, US, Russia, everyone shakes hands. Like, okay, no more military AI.
But that's never gonna happen.
Never gonna happen, right? Like, there's nothing physical preventing this. Like, this is a thing that physics allows to happen, but it's never gonna happen. happen. Like,
Yeah,
come on,
game
like
theory and negative incentives.
exactly. So like
Yeah.
I could talk about like all kinds of things where I'm like, well, okay, if I was, God Emperor of the world, then sure, we could do a lot of things. And if humans were more rational and if we were kinder to each other, there's lots of things we could do. Meh, but that's not how it is. So the positive view is, so the negative view is that I think getting a Russia, America, and China to all be friends is literally harder than building an aligned AGI. Literally harder. I genuinely think this is true. I think the problem of building an AGI, aligned AGI, is very hard, but I don't expect it to be like 1,000x harder than figuring out quantum physics. Like, I think it's probably as hard or harder than like what people did when they first discovered quantum physics or like general relativity or something. I expect it to be like as hard or harder, but not like 1,000 times harder. Maybe it's actually easier. Like I could also imagine it being easier. Maybe if we just had Einstein and Heisenberg and von Neumann reincarnate and they just spend 10 years on this to just figure it out. I think this is possible. I think if we had 15 Einstein level geniuses work on this for 10 years, I think that would probably be enough. So the problem is we don't have that many geniuses, and many geniuses are busy doing whatever other people are doing. Yeah, a lot of other things, unfortunately. But yeah, so what are some paths that I do see? I think there are some. And of course, with conjecture, my goal is to try to bring us as close to some of those as possible. A lot of this routes through, trying to, on the one hand, work with policymakers and labs and stuff to, you know, at least, give us a bit more time. I'm not saying stop doing AI. That's ridiculous. Like you can't stop it. But we could be like, for example, we could like publish less dangerous research. Like I think of a lot of AI research should be called gain of function research in the same way, but there's biology gain of function. Like obviously, holy shit, stop gain of functioning COVID viruses. Holy shit, like how is this still legal? Like I'm losing my mind. Like just ban gain of function virus research. Like it doesn't help. It didn't help us in the last pandemic. It is virus labs are not safe. Holy shit, just stop. Like, this of course again also shows why this is hard. So not super optimistic there. We're trying. And on the research side, so if I can give one policy recommendation or whatever, just the simplest thing possible, like holy shit, please just fund alignment research. Like literally just do the thing. There are less than 100 people already wrote that. This is a thing academia should be great at. Like there are so many brilliant, computer science professors and young students that would be wonderful for working on these problems. And I think the reason they're not is purely contingent. I think it's purely historical, purely cultural. I don't think it's like not an exciting problem. It's the most exciting problem. It's a cool problem. It's a problem you can work on. It's not easy to work on, but it is a problem that can be worked on. And one of the things I would be very excited about if, for example, governments could just come out and say, hey, alignment, big problem. Well, even if they don't fund it, which they should, but even if they didn't, just saying it, I think would make it respectable. Now everyone can be like, oh, yeah, this is actually a real problem. And, then a lot of, grad students can come out of the woodworks and be like, hey, actually, I do want to work on this problem. Like I actually have a bunch of ideas. And, because grad students, most ideas will be terrible, but still that's how research happens. That's how progress happens. So if we can get the academic, system, which I have many problems with. I have many problems with the academic system. Mobilize. This is like a Pareto improvement, like pretty obviously so. Like, sure, are there even better ways this could go? Yes. But again, let's be realistic. This seems like something realistic. This is a thing that could happen. Like, I think there's lots of people, there's lots of talent that's interested in this problem if given social permission to do so. And I think this is something that doesn't cost governments very much, or like high stat, like just having high stats professors come out and say like, yep, this is actually super cool, like what Stuart Russell did. I think if just we had more high status, scientists say this kind of stuff, I think there's a lot of real potential there.
That's at least somewhat optimistic. I know we're coming up on time here, man, so I want to respect that. Maybe a closing thought I think is, always one that is on a lot of people's mind. How long do we have until, in your mind, something like an AGI really starts to become a real concern? Like, do you think that we have 5, 6, 7 years to figure this alignment thing out, or do we have like 15 or 20 years? And obviously this is very speculative, but in your mind, like where do you land these days?
Depends on the mood, but like the joke answer I tend to give people is 30% in the next 5 years, 50% in the next like 7 to 10, 99% by 2100, 1% it's already happened.
Oh, fair. That's fair enough, man. Well, then, with that being said, any closing thoughts? Any last words you'd like to leave the audience?
In general, I just want people to like both see that AI is great, and I'm so excited that like the potential that it has for humanity and such. But it's like with the genie, as with every genie story goes, the third wish is to undo the first two. We don't want to get into that scenario. We don't want to deal with genies here. We don't want to build systems that like sort of want what we want. These are very powerful systems that we're building, and we are pushing directly towards. This is not sci-fi. Like this is sci-fi in the same way a magical brick I can hold up to my head to talk to my friend across the planet is sci-fi. Like if you consider that sci-fi, then all right, fair enough. But then look around you. I'm talking to a magic brick. That can like perfectly reproduce my visage and my voice and send it across the whole globe, right? Like we live in sci-fi. Like this is not like we live in a strange world. We live in a strange timeline, and technology is crazy, and it's going to get more crazy. Like this is not a weird thing. I want people to think of this as just like a natural thing. I want people when they're exposed to the alignment to be like, oh yeah, of course. Like yeah, like that's a very reasonable thing. What are you doing about it, Mr. Politician or Mr. Government or Mr. CEO of a big tech company? Why aren't you taking it seriously? And I think if we do take it seriously, it is a solvable problem. It is a problem that we can overcome. But man, we're not on track for it right now.
Well, let's hope that your work will put us back on track.
Well, I hope so, and I think it's possible. It's very funny. I think about it sometimes. Someone's late at night. I'll be up at night, and I want. It's kind of weird. We're not in a timeline where we've obviously lost. I think there are many ways things could have gone. Like for example, the Cold War had dragged on, and like military AI became like a big thing. I think we would have just been like super screwed, and there's been nothing we could have done. And like there's a bunch of other ways where I think things could have just like totally been over, like super over. Maybe we could have Schmidt-Huber developed AGI in 1991 and we all died. Whatever, right? But we're not. The future is not yet written. The decisions have not yet been made. There is still time, but not much. There is not much time. If we really change things, I think it's possible over the next couple of years. I think we can make it. But yeah, we're not currently on track for winning, but we can do it.
We have to just shift some priorities and take it seriously.
Humanity has done this before. Yeah. Like it is crazy. Like with all the terrible things humanity has done, like all how stupid and greedy and selfish and terrible humans are, we've done a lot of great things. Like there's a lot of things to be very ashamed of about being a human. There's lots of things to be very, very, very ashamed of. But there's also a lot of things to be really goddamn proud of. Like there's really a lot of things we can be proud of. So we have the potential to be heroic as a species. We have the potential, but it doesn't happen for free. It doesn't happen by default even. It's, that's why we celebrate it. So, let's try to be heroes one last time.